Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk About Cities, a podcast dedicated to making complex topics in urban planning and architecture more accessible. Today we will introduce a slightly different form of the podcast where we talk about a current topic in a shorter episode. This first time it will be about the plans of Brussels and Paris to implement large car-free zones. I'm Katharina.
And I'm Matthias. Let's talk about cities.
So back in the fourth episode, it was about ecologically sustainable planning. We talked about how the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, wants to transform the city into a 15-minute cities where it would never take longer than 15 minutes to reach your work or school or maybe a supermarket.
Yeah, these kind of everyday life destinations.
Exactly, by foot or with your bike. And to me, it goes along with this goal that now the city is being transformed in a more pedestrian, more walkable, friendly city. Mm-hmm. And I think one of those measures is that they actually ban the cars to a large degree from certain zones. And they have now announced that they want to do this starting in 4 arrondissements, how they call it, so 4 districts, which will be in the inner city. And we kind of figured it could be a good way to talk about this news, actually. And
it's about a week old, the decision finally to do it, but it won't take effect until 2024.
Exactly.
Apparently. But also I just thought 4 districts might sound like a little, depending what your idea of the size of a district is. But
when you look at the plan, it's actually quite big.
Yeah, we recommend having a look at the map and seeing which districts are drawn up to be a part of it, because it's actually quite a considerable size of the inner city of Paris.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think it's quite bold, even though I think as a disclaimer also you should probably mention that if I say it's car-free, not all cars are banned. Residents can still drive there if they move, for example, or let's say there's a person who's in a wheelchair or in any other way handicapped, they will have a special permission to go there. Of course, fire trucks or police or other emergency vehicles can drive there. So I think that's just important to mention. If you say car-free zones, it's mostly about reducing the traffic that goes through those districts.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is, however, already a big, or will be probably a big improvement for the pedestrians.
Yeah, and also in terms of the pollution that is eliminated by that. We'll talk a bit later about Brussels, where I've found some numbers of their expectations of how much will change by that. But I'd also like to mention in regards to Paris that one of the first questions which arises is also, well, how will delivery vehicles reach their destinations? Because obviously there are everything from shops to cafes or restaurants within that zone. And in general, delivery vehicles are also not banned. There are different strategies in different cities. Sometimes there are particular time periods, for example, during the night, when they don't bother people or create as much traffic as during the day, to have deliveries made during the night. But in Paris, interestingly, there have been attempts already to reduce the need for delivery motor vehicles at all through what I found is a very intelligent solution, namely to make sure that big deliveries are made to the rail yards. And in Paris, they have, I think it's 4 large rail yards around on each side of the city, which then each can be used as a sort of logistical center. And then that can be loaded directly from trains that drive into this facility to smaller trucks. Generally, these trucks then bring the goods to a smaller logistical center. And from this new type of logistical center that can also be in urban environments and don't need to be in sort of industrial areas on the periphery of the city. And from there on, it can be distributed to the client or to shops or so, to the destination with electric bikes, for example, like electrical cargo bikes. And I think that's a very clever way to deal with the issue of delivery mobility for delivery of goods, and especially with the rise of e-commerce, and to avoid that creating even more traffic.
I think we could actually once make a whole episode about it, because it's always about this last mile, right?
Yeah,
like how does the package then come to the consumer? And then obviously you talk about oftentimes very urbanized areas where those lorries do actually create a lot of traffic, noise, pollution. So
and it's also an issue for them, because if there's a lot of traffic, then that also means traffic jams, and that impacts their performance or their delivery times. So it's something that everyone can benefit, and very interesting when you get away from that sphere of competing interests and work together to find really sustainable kind of progressive solutions. I find that very interesting.
Yeah, and also one last thing to Paris, they also talked about, which I think is kind of connected to this whole topic, they talked about having those noise radars now, where they say that it's not only about how you perceive the street when walking or cycling through, but also for the residents, that obviously it's not nice if those very loud motor cycles or also other vehicles drive through the streets, and therefore they have started to put up some noise radars, but will do it even more in the future, and that is to ban those very loud vehicles, as I said.
To measure when a car is particularly loud, and much the same way as a speed camera register who's the driver, and find them.
Yeah.
Right, to disincentivize it.
But let's move on to Brussels. What have you found there? What's their approach?
Brussels is one of the most polluted cities in Europe. In a study of nitrogen oxide, which is one of the most dangerous pollutants emitted by motor vehicles, it was found that out of 800 European urban areas, Brussels was the 8th most contaminated. Now, that's not only because of motor vehicles, it's also because of factories, for example, but still they have a huge issue with pollution. So with that as one reason, they, in 2020, 2 years ago, decided on a new plan, which is dealing with the whole city. So it was a comprehensive mobility plan called Good Move, with different parts to it. But one of the parts is that they'll make, much like in Paris, the city center car-free, which means car reduced. And it's interesting how they've done it, in the sense that they are taking a bit of a different approach to just looking at that as one zone and trying to reduce traffic only in that. They are viewing the whole city as a network, as it is, obviously, of traffic. And they've divided the city up into 28 meshes, as they call it. So those are the different zones, and they border each other, and the borders are then usually main roads. And then they're especially trying to reduce like throughway traffic in residential areas, including in the city center, and moving this traffic to larger roads around the city in particular. So there's a ring road around Brussels, as in many cities. Then at key locations in the intersections of these meshes, there will be parking facilities like parking houses and connections to public transport. So it's sort of a multi-pronged approach to it. It's not just about reducing cars. It's about achieving a transformation of the mobility behavior of people and making it easier as well, not just getting the whip out, but also improving the conditions for public transport. And they've done estimates on this which show that traffic should be reduced by about 35% on local roads, about 10% on the main roads, and then there will be an increase on the ring road of 18% of the traffic. But it should be dimensioned to handle that and not be built out. And overall, in the city, it should lead to a reduction of 4% in traffic. And within the whole perimeter of the region, it should lead to a reduction of 21%. And that corresponds to 440,000 trips per day by car.
Wow.
So that really makes a huge difference, especially in terms of lowering the emissions of the pollutions. I find, as I said, interesting with that approach that they view the whole city as a network, and they know that obviously still there has to be motorized traffic, but they're trying to optimize where that traffic is, and not just based on the traffic, like to make that as efficient as possible, but also based on, well, where do you actually want to have traffic? And I think in much the same sense, they decided already 3 years ago to implement a speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour in the entire city at once, which also achieves that they reduce noise levels and they reduce pollution through that. And they also make the streets more comfortable spaces, because it's about that as well, of course, like not just these facts of noise and pollutions, but how the spaces are perceived, and then what you can do with them that you couldn't do if cars are driving very fast. How you might be able to use, for example, they will also they will remove parking spaces, and those that are left will become more expensive based on which zone they are in, to disincentivize on-street parking. And then you might be able to use the space where there before was parking, but that obviously is also dependent on the cars that still drive on those streets not driving that quickly.
Yeah, I think it's really a lot about actually showing, kind of as a test bed in certain areas, how it could be, because so many people seem to have forgotten that it's not a given that this space belongs to the car. And I think it's just really important to show what else could be done. And then based on those alternatives, we can still go back to the car. But I think it's just really nice to see how it could work otherwise, and then base your decision on that, or just, realize that it's probably a much higher quality of life for many. Also,
I'd like to point out that obviously it's a matter of quality of life, but it's also a matter of life and death, literally, because of those pollutions. As mentioned, studies show that several hundred premature deaths each year are caused by pollutions. There was one street in Graz in Austria, the second biggest city, which they could show that traffic on this one street caused, I think it was about 4 premature deaths per year. And that may sound little, but it's quite insane, really, that's accepted. Obviously, it's also a matter of accidents being reduced, for example, as in the example of reduced speed limits, but also generally how we share the space. And far too often pedestrians or bicyclists are less of a priority to the point where they are actually in danger because of cars driving around. Another thing that I'd like to mention in the context of the Brussels plan is that it's been done through a participatory process as well, especially as we went through that last time in the last episode. So since 2016, for 4 years, there's been a participatory process which has involved public and private stakeholders as well as associations. And they've been invited to discussion forums, for example, and also looking at examples from other cities and what has worked well and what hasn't. Also there was a citizens panel formed in the Brussels Parliament to make sure that what came out of the process, a participatory process, was also taken into account in the decision-making process. And I think that's very important, because otherwise, oftentimes, like for example, as a reaction to the Brussels plan, many local business owners in the city center have complained that most of their customers come by car and they're afraid of losing turnover because of the plan. But if you look to examples, there are lots in Vienna, for example, as well, with the main shopping street, Maria-Hilfer-Straße, but in Oslo as well, as an example, that reduced car traffic in the city center by removing parking spots. It can now be shown that turnover in the shops where that was implemented increased by about 10%. So even in terms of business interests, it's a positive
Makes
move.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before wrapping up, we can also have a look at a place where a car-free zone has already been implemented since a long time, namely Pontevedra in Spain. And there, a large part of the city, mostly the city center, has been car-free since 1999. So almost 25 years now. And it was Lores, who's still the mayor, and when he became the mayor, he did it right away as his first thing in duty, kind of. And back then, it was even more planning was even more car oriented than it is now, and so he was perceived as crazy by many, but still did it and made it car-free, and also changed the paving of the city, which of course also plays a huge role in actually showing or making it very easy to understand where pedestrians can walk freely and where they can't. So this was one of the things he also did. And I think it was maybe easier there than it is in other places because it's quite a small city. It has around 80,000 inhabitants. So it's very walkable as it's quite small also. And you can basically go around the whole inner city in like 25 minutes or so. So you don't really need a car. And he said, like, for special occasions, like if someone gets married or so, then the bride and the groom can actually drive to the church, but then the rest of the guests will walk, and it's not a problem. And he was just really, he said for him it's paradise. And I guess him being voted into being mayor over and over again also shows
probably has something to do with that decision.
I guess, because it seems like the inhabitants are also quite proud of living there. And, you know, it's this pioneer example of how it can work out when you actually ban cars from cities, and how you can hear the birds sing again, and like very romantic stuff like that. If you've ever been to Venice, for example, walking along the streets and alleys there, you might not think about it at first, but obviously because of how the city is built and that they mainly use the canals, there are some cars sometimes on certain streets, but generally there aren't. And it's quite amazing, really, if you're used to, as most people are, I'm sure, being assigned to the pavement or to the sidewalk, this tiny fraction of the space, and still streets are public space. So that's really a bit odd, and sometimes it just needs a few examples like that, I think, to open our minds up to show that it's possible.
Yeah. So that was the first episode of a bit of a new format for us, with quick episodes on current topics. We hope you enjoyed it and have become interested in the topic of car-free cities.
Thank you for listening. Let's talk about cities.